My name is Sam. I'm the Partnerships and Communications Manager here at Fairygodboss. And if you didn't already know, Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. Our platform supports women throughout their careers with free resources like company reviews, job listings, webinars with various experts, virtual recruiting events, and a community where users can be honest about their triumphs and failures, either as themselves or anonymously. So before we get started, I want to let you know we will have a Q&A at the end of this webinar. You'll see a Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to leave questions throughout. You can leave them as yourself or anonymously, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end. If you can't find the Q&A, you can also leave them in the chat. I'll be monitoring both. And this webinar will be recorded and sent out to everyone and in a follow-up email later today. So if you miss anything, you have to jump out early, you'll have the chance to rewatch it back later. Here with me today is Lynn Juby. Lynn founded Bespoke Professional to empower women to land their next growth role at a market value salary. Lynn made a career pivot in 2014 from teaching high school to learning and development in the tech sector. After building a new team and spending the majority of her time hiring, she became frustrated with the hiring process and the barriers it created to diversity, gender equality, and pay equity. She is known for empowering job seekers to make decisions that work best for them, for giving actionable steps, next steps with explanations behind any recommendations. Thank you so much for being here today, Lynn. Over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to see all of you guys on, and especially representation from South America, where I lived for 5 years. So cool to see all of you guys from all over the world. As Samantha said, I am a job search strategist. So I work with people that are in the thick of their job search right now. And it's a lot of fun. And I'm going to share with you guys the things that I've learned a lot from my clients and from eat, sleeping, and breathing the job search all of the time. So we're going to cover today how to determine if you're qualified for a role. And then a lot of job searching is, we call it networking, but it's really about leveraging your network. How do you do that? And then how to best use social media like Fairygodboss, which is an amazing asset for you guys. And also, of course, a little bit about LinkedIn as well. So I have a very love-hate relationship with the job search, specifically when it comes to LinkedIn. And what happened to me when I made that pivot that Samantha was telling you guys about, I had only been a high school teacher, and I had done that abroad for a couple years. And I had also started a business, so I got really hungry to do something new. And so when I was moving to Seattle, I said, you know what? Tech is the future. Almost every company is going to have a tech aspect. I really would like to work in tech, but I'm really open-minded about what I want to do. So I went onto LinkedIn, and LinkedIn basically told me that I was not qualified for anything except to be a teacher, which was incredibly frustrating. And I felt like I don't know what I'm going to do. Luckily, I was referred into a job at Microsoft, and that ended up being my first role. But a lot of how I was able to pivot had to do with luck. And obviously, this is not what I'd recommend to other people. So we're going to go through essentially what I would have recommended that someone like me would do. And another thing I want to say is I think someone's personal story is really important, because I have definitely had those face down moments when it comes to everything like LinkedIn or negotiating salary. But the thing is that there's a lot more to it than just one time I did these things. So I like to base a lot of my stuff on research and more than just my own experiences as well. So why is it so hard to determine if you're qualified? What I saw as I was starting this was over and over again, people were saying, I don't know if I'm qualified for this job. I don't know where I fit into the market. And then I had a chance to really talk about this with a woman named Venus Rico. And she is actually a neuroscientist who helps companies de-bias their interview processes and their hiring process. And basically what she said is most of the job descriptions that you're seeing are from the 1970s. So job seekers often want growth nowadays. A lot of us switch jobs every 2 to 3 years, and we have to grow because the world is changing so quickly. Yet job descriptions are still written as if they want someone with 100% of the qualifications. So what happens is we look at those job descriptions and it's really hard to know if we're qualified for it. And we want something very different in theory than what the hiring managers want. They're saying, I want this person who has all this experience, but the person who has that experience doesn't want that job. So that makes it incredibly hard to figure out where we fit into the market. And add on top of that, the things we already know, like there are jobs that exist now. I think about people like my sister who does social media and how her job was so different a few years ago. Someone with 5 years of experience might not know some of the most current things anyway. The other thing that we probably all heard about is something called the confidence gap, if you've ever read that article in The Atlantic. And this is something that's really near and dear to my heart, because what I'm seeing from my clients is this fear of, am I qualified for something even though I've been given the interview, even though I've gotten really far in the interview process? And what I want to point out about this is part of it is not, I don't feel like it's necessarily always a lack of confidence. There's this concept, and they talk about this in the confidence gap, called the Dunning-Kruger effect, where the more competent people become, the less confident they become. And so I know that sounds very counterintuitive, but as we get smarter and wiser and we know our industry better, when you've had all these experiences, you're 10 plus years into your career, you start to realize that your success doesn't just depend on you. And often we get this message that we're supposed to sell ourselves in a way that doesn't feel authentic. So if you are a really competent person, you don't like to make blanket statements about how you're really good at all these things, because you know that work today is a collaborative environment and that it depends on the company, your manager, your coworkers to be successful, not just you. So we want to approach it from a really authentic place. And that makes it even more confusing to try to figure out, well, do I belong here? Should I go after this? And I want to say maybe we do have those moments where we are feeling not so confident, but sometimes we're rightfully cautious about blanketly saying we're going to do something or going after something. And so I don't always think that's a bad thing. I want to honor that. And I found with my clients that it's deeper than just a lack of confidence. What they're saying is insecurity is really just seeing this opaque thing and knowing that there are challenges ahead that they might not be able to anticipate exactly what they are yet. So how do you deal with this? Well, I like to do a quick and dirty because I'll tell you a story. So one of the things that I do with almost every client I work with is I have them send me job descriptions. And I work with a lot of people one-on-one. And there's, out of all the clients I've worked with over the past year and a half, only one time did a client send me job descriptions that they were not qualified for. So often we'll have a little discussion about it, but I'll say, why don't you take a try, just send me some job descriptions, and then we will actually align you to those, and we will run through all of the things that you've done compared to this. And they are always extremely qualified for them. So I've come up with kind of a quick test, since when I tell them, why don't you just try it? And it often works. I want to empower you to do that. But I know saying, you know what, just go for it often isn't good enough for those who really want to understand how to look at this and evaluate this. So here's your quick qualification test. We often get really wrapped up in, is someone going to hire us? But that's not necessarily the first question we should be asking ourselves. We should ask ourselves, do I believe I can do the job? Because you have a general sense of the type of things that you have learned over a long period of time and the type of things that transfer, and then the things that you need to learn on the job and you can learn on the job. So often if you look at job requirements, you'll have a feeling, you know what, I haven't been the one leading that before, but I think I could do it. Or I have been mentoring and onboarding other people, but I haven't been someone's boss, but I've done lots of leadership functions. And the other one is, I would say, we want to look for, do you meet about 50% of the requirements? That one's hard because there are sometimes technical requirements. If I have people on that are highly technical, that have technical interviews, obviously that's going to be much more complicated. But when we're thinking about roles that are in sales, marketing, program management, project management, that often leverage our soft skills, those are things where when you meet on paper, you think you meet 50% of the requirements, I'll actually find that if we were to go through it together, you'll probably meet closer to 70 to 80 when you think about the fact that you have dealt with some of those other ones in some way, if you don't know that particular qualification backwards and forwards. And if you guys have questions about this qualification test, I kind of assume that's where a lot of questions will come from. We're going to talk about those during the Q&A section. So, job hunting is harder than ever. And I know this is a bit of a blanket statement, but what I have found is that it seems like we get this message that there's so many job openings. You know, I live in the Seattle area where they say currently there are more openings than there are people living in the city. But because of the things we talked about earlier in terms of how job descriptions are written and how we look at them, it's more confusing and it's hard for the two parties to find each other because we are looking for that change and we are looking to grow in our careers. And the hiring process often, you know, a lot of people don't do hiring full time and there's a lot of pressure. And so there's a lot of things happening with recruiters being overworked, with companies growing really quickly, that does make it much harder. On top of that, we have the fact that if you're trying to network into a role, as you move around, if you're new to a community, that's going to make it harder to find a job in that community. We also know that 42% of women take breaks. So when you take a break, it's not necessarily that you are less qualified. And I find that if your break is under 2 years, it often goes hardly noticed. Although often you're in a different place because you feel like, okay, how do I get up to date? You're more nervous about interviewing, getting back into it. So those are things that can complicate it. And those are things that are especially common for women as well. We also see, as things are changing really quickly, you see people pivoting. So for example, when I, a few years ago was helping someone find a job, and they were saying, well, I don't think I'm qualified to do this SEO job because I don't have 5 years of SEO experience. Well, what did SEO look like 5 years before that? Because this was quite a while ago. It was very different. So we're often having to pivot because the world is changing so quickly. So all of these things together, if you have this sensation that it feels harder than it did for you last time you looked for a job, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, the biggest shock to me when I started doing job search strategy with clients 100% of the time was that people would come to me and I would think there's no way this person's going to need help. And everyone universally needed help, and it didn't matter how badass their resume was. And a lot of my clients, there was a period where I was feeling extremely self-conscious because it felt like the people coming to me had much more interesting and robust careers than I had. And because this is harder than ever, when people are running to these strategies, these challenges for the first time, it feels like you're the only one going through this. And that's why it's also so exciting to have things like this where you can realize that there are other people struggling with those same challenges. And it doesn't mean it's because you're not qualified or you're not smart. So there's a couple of things that I recommend keeping in mind in terms of helping you through the job search. So the first one is it's okay to pursue multiple types of roles. This one is interesting because companies will often tell you, we want someone who's specifically passionate about this or that. But let me give you an example of why this works. So my coming from a teaching background and getting into learning and development in tech, it would make sense for someone with my background to pursue both a curriculum writing role or a learning content creation role, or something like a product trainer role, and eventually getting into training, program, and project management. So the thing about that is when you're pursuing multiple types of roles like that, it's okay, but people might ask you, what do you prefer? And the key is talking about, why do I like this and why am I going after that? If the thing at the heart of that, which for me was always how people learn, is truly something that you love, then it's easy to talk about those things, and often your experience will make you qualified for different types of roles. The other thing is thinking about, where do you want to go? And I think when people ask us something like, where do I want to be in 5 years? It's extremely intimidating. But if you can kind of let go of fear for a second, say, where would I really like to be? What is my dream job? And the key to this is we often don't know exactly what that title looks like. With all the people that come to me who aren't sure where they fit, it's not that they don't know what they like or what they're good at. It's just that they're not really sure how they fit into the market. And more specifically, we're not always sure exactly what that job title is. So if you head in a direction, if you say, I essentially want to go north, think about the types of jobs that are in that path and take a job that is on the way to that dream job. So it is totally okay to deviate from what you've done in the past, and things will come your way often that don't necessarily they're not in line with what you've done in the past. But what matters is this job going to help me get to where I want to go? And is it going to give me the experience that I want? And it's okay, again, if you don't know the exact role, but is it in the area of what I want to do? And so that's often what I call like the stepping stone role. So that's the third one. And the last thing is messaging. So often I talk to people about how to create their networking messaging or how to create their pitch. Because when we go out and we talk to people, whether it's on Fairygodboss or whether it is in person, often we want to have, what is it that I'm looking to do? And people will tell you, oh, in order for people to help you, you have to know what you want. But the key to that is you have to sound concise and decisive in what you want, but you don't necessarily have to know the job title. So when you're going out and you're telling people what you're looking for, you're going to say things like, I really enjoyed starting up a new training program at a previous company. I'm looking to take that learning and development and program management experience into a nonprofit role. And if you see what I did there, I didn't name out a specific role that I want. I said, I'm looking to leverage these things in my next role. And that really helps people. It leaves the door open in order for people to say, you know what, I think that I should introduce you to so-and-so. But it also makes you sound very decisive. And the key to that is the wording. When you plan out how you're going to say it, you can concisely and decisively say what you're looking for, but no one says you have to say the exact job title. So don't let people sort of confuse you in terms of the way that you talk about what you want to do. You can leave the door open and you can say, I'm headed in this direction. But if you don't know the job title, that's totally okay. So even though we have this amazing platform of Fairygodboss, which I'm going to talk about, we have to address LinkedIn because this is the number one place where recruiters go, where hiring professionals go, and it's something that you can't neglect. But often I find, and this is a really fun thing because I think people think, oh, if I am in my 50s, then all these people in their 20s are better at LinkedIn. Or I think people in their 20s are like, I'm new to this game. I don't understand LinkedIn. And you guys saw, I was not very experienced with LinkedIn when I was getting into tech. And I found it to be really confusing and it's changing all the time. But I want to give you guys 2 things that you can do that you could literally do tomorrow in 10 minutes so that you can walk away with some actionable steps. So the first one, you've probably been told this, is your picture. And the reason I bring this up is because a lot of people are really stressed about their picture and they are saying, you know, I need to hire someone in big cities like New York or Seattle. People will charge $500 sometimes for your LinkedIn profile picture. And the truth is, if your picture is out of date or it's one of those pictures that it's cropped and you can tell that you cropped someone else out of the picture, all you need to do is find someone you trust. And now we have such amazing cell phone cameras. You can stand against a wall. You can get someone to take your headshot and it doesn't have to be perfect. I would recommend that you smile because I find that sometimes people end up looking angry in their pictures if they don't smile. But find that person that you trust to take a couple headshots of you. I've taken so many marketing photos at my co-working space just having other people take my picture. So check your picture, make sure that it's current, that you have one, and get that done. And don't stress about having it taken professionally. If you want to do that later on, you always can. And the second thing, and this is really important, is most people, and I find this is super, super common, so don't feel embarrassed if this is you, but most people, if you were to show me your resume, it would be, depending on how many years you've been in your career, a page or 2 pages long. There would be bullets of the most important things that you did at each role. But yet with those same people, when I go to their LinkedIn profiles, all I see is the title. I don't see any bullets below. It doesn't show me what they're doing. Now, the thing about this is that LinkedIn is a search engine. So there are people going into LinkedIn every day and recruiters who use this recruiting. It's like if you've heard of ATS systems, that is when you put your resume in and a computer looks at it and decides who is going to make the first cut based on keywords. LinkedIn operates essentially the same way. So what happens is by you not having any bullets on your LinkedIn profile, you are losing out on huge opportunities. And it's not always just about the proactive reach outs, although I have to say, I have a few clients who are amazing people but have challenges on paper. And for example, someone who owned a business but that business is kind of considered an outdated field and she sold it. So in that, you don't expect someone like that to get proactive reach outs. Or someone who works for a company, she's worked there for 15 years, so it's quite a long time. And it's a company with almost no presence, no one knows who it is, and their website is super out of date. Both those people, after cleaning up their LinkedIn and putting bullets on their LinkedIn, got proactive reach outs. So all you have to do is pull up your resume, pull up that Word document or that Google Doc version of it, and take those bullets and copy them over to your LinkedIn profile. So people will stress, like, I don't have the right words on it, I'm worried about it. Doesn't matter. Get your resume onto your LinkedIn profile, copy the bullets into the professional section under each role. And by doing that, not only is that going to help with the proactive reach outs and the recruiters and that type of thing, but also your LinkedIn profile is the best piece of collateral that you can use in networking. When you think about emails, when you think about meeting people in person, imagine getting an email from someone, right? And when you get that email, when there is a PDF copy of their resume on that email, so someone's saying, hey, I really want you to meet Emily. Emily, is really interested in your organization. Would you mind having a phone call with her? And someone's connecting Emily to you. So when you get that, there's a PDF file of Emily's resume. So you have to click on that. You have to download it. Then you have to open it. If you're like me, I don't have Word on my computer right now. So if it's in Word, I have to convert that or whatever. Now, if someone hyperlinks Emily's LinkedIn profile into the email, it's so much easier for me to click on it. And then I can see things in the same format that I'm used to seeing them. And I can go on LinkedIn and I can connect with her directly. So it's so much easier if you do it this way, and all you have to do is copy and paste. So don't wait until you have the perfect LinkedIn profile, the perfect resume. Bring those bullets over there tomorrow, and this is something you can do in 10 minutes. Also be aware that LinkedIn is a little bit weird about bullets. So what you guys can do if you want, and this is what I did when I created the bullets on my LinkedIn profile, is I went to someone else's, and you guys are welcome to use mine if you want, and I literally copied the bullets from theirs, and then I pasted them on, and I did bullet, and I hit the space bar. And that's how I got the bullets on my LinkedIn profile. So you guys can do that as well. Just make sure to put that information on there. So let's talk about, now that you have that and you're ready to network, what are you going to be doing? So a lot of times you're going to hear people talking about networking, and I think this is a confusing word for a lot of reasons. We think of networking as going out and meeting new people. And the truth is, there's so much more to it than that. So we're like, okay, I want to go out there and meet more new people. You have people in your network that you can use now. Furthermore, here's how we usually think about job search networking. And even people who are like, oh yes, I'm going to leverage my network. So we think, okay, let's say that I'm looking for a job at Rover. And I want to work at Rover. And so what I do is I say, I'm going to go to LinkedIn, or I'm going to ask around. I'm going to go to Fairygodboss, and I'm going to say, who knows someone who works at Rover? And then someone connects me to someone who works at Rover who I've never met, and they get on the phone with me, if I'm lucky, right? The problem with that is that person doesn't care about me. And I don't mean that that person is not nice and willing to help. Maybe in some cases, some companies have great referral bonuses, so maybe people will take the time because their company is really incentivizing and encouraging them to be a recruiter informally for the company. But you're going to fall on that person's to-do list underneath their family, their friends, the holidays, their own work obligations, and all these other things. You're going to end up falling at the bottom of their to-do list. So what you want to do is you want to leverage your current network. You want to think about the people who are invested in you and your success. And the reason that most people don't do this is because they think, okay, well, how would my best friend, who maybe is a makeup artist, how would she be able to connect me to a job at wherever it is I want to work, at a tech company? And the thing is that often it's not about just finding one person to one person. It's about saying, if that person cares about me, they can think, who are the people that I know that are well connected? Who are the people that I know who are kind of ambitious like my friend? Who are the people who, are one step closer? And often you want to think about it as, my friend is going to introduce me to someone who's going to introduce me to someone. And it might take 5 steps to get to that job, but I can't tell you how essential this has been in my own career and has been the key for my clients. So for me, I had kind of a mentor sponsor at my first tech job at Microsoft, and she was doing this for a lot of people. And she introduced me to someone, and I was able to go to that person's office and sit down with them. And I couldn't believe that, of course, she was willing to pass me on and we had some connection in that way. But then the next person. And I think I took that one meeting about 7 meetings deep. And I think where it gets really powerful is thinking about my client, that this was the main way that she got a job. And I'm going to call her Emily. That's not her real name, but she had been out of work for 2 years because of health reasons. So, and she was, I would say, very particular in a great way about the kind of company she wanted to work for, that they were going to have great mission and vision. And so she did this, and she was able to get a job where she beat out 160 people, even though she hadn't been working for 2 years. She got her first director title, and she hadn't done a face-to-face interview in 7 years. So, not to mention, we ended up getting her a really, really good salary, and more than she even expected, and more than the initial conversations let on. And so this was a big part of her going on and saying, how do I leverage my current network and how do I talk to people? And when you have people that care about you, and then it's different when you sit down with one person, when you take that along, even though you're getting to the point where those people don't necessarily know you, they kind of feel connected to you in a different way because they've been passed on that way. So it really moves it beyond the transactional, where you're just trying to get in touch with someone who has never ever talked to you before, and you may fall at the bottom of their to-do list. One thing I do want to point out, and there's a great book I'm currently reading, I have not finished, the book Give and Take by Adam Grant. And he actually talks about the fact that most people get their jobs through their dormant connections, meaning someone that you worked with in the past or someone that you know from your past that you haven't talked to in a while. And he doesn't go too deep into the research. I think he said 17% of people get jobs through someone in their immediate network. And he said something like 26% of people get jobs through their second step out network. But I also think it's because if you think of your second step out network, there's many more people that represents, because for every one person you know here, that person knows all of their people. So you want to make sure you think about people who you've worked with in the past, who know your work, who know how good you are. And often that person is going to see it not necessarily as a favor just to you, but to introduce you to someone who's hiring. They might see it as a favor to the person who is hiring, knowing that you're a great hire if they worked with you in the past. So don't forget about people that you haven't talked to in a long time. My first job in tech that I was telling you about at Microsoft, it was someone that I hadn't talked to in 10 years. So I reached out to her and initially didn't ask her directly. I said, I'm thinking about a job, but I'm also thinking about where I'm going to live, all these things. And I hadn't talked to her in 10 years. So it goes to show that you want to think about all the people that you know that you've worked with, your dormant connections, and really start there with the people who are invested in you and your success. Now, we also want to take advantage of communities. And the thing is that what I have found, for example, is I've had a lot of clients who've taken a break, and a lot of them, as I mentioned, Emily, it was for different reasons, but a lot of times it's for families such as childcare. And the people that I found that want to talk to me, want to help my clients, are often moms, because moms leave work. And I think this extends to understanding anyone who's taken a break. And when they have had a hard time getting back into the job market, but they know I'm just as qualified, and once I got back and I did great, they're thinking, wow, there's so many people out there. It would make economic sense. Moms are more productive than anyone else. And, we should hire these people. So there's a lot of other networks and ways that you can leverage people that you haven't met. So I like to say, spend about a third of your time leveraging your current network. And then also think about spending no more than a third of your time going online and saying, how can I connect with these huge networks of people that I'm affiliated to through Fairygodboss and through LinkedIn. And because all of you now have a Fairygodboss account, I have a strong suspicion that the people that show up here are the type of people that want to connect and that are already well connected and are leveraging their resources in other places like LinkedIn as well. And so I would highly encourage you to think about, how can I connect with people in Fairygodboss? And here's why. Even So it's true, like I said, that you have these people who you know and are invested in your success. And if you meet someone on Fairygodboss, they may or may not be invested in your success. The amount of time it takes you to reach out to people and make friends with people on a platform like this is a lot less than it takes for you to sit down and have coffee with someone. So you can reach a large amount of people in a short amount of time. So it makes sense for you to do this from a cost benefit analysis. And again, I have found that networks like this of women who are here to lift each other up are incredible at helping others and a great resource for you. And you know what? If you show up, you better be willing to help others as well. I'm sure you have a lot more to offer than you realize. And I actually have a good story about this. So because I am in business for myself, I do this a lot now, thinking about all the help that I can need spreading the word about events and things like that. So a couple weeks ago, I was on the LinkedIn Premium Career Group, and there was a guy's article there, and I thought it was very odd that no one had commented on his article. It looked like a really interesting topic. So I went through, I read it. It took me a few minutes, and I left a comment on the article, and we ended up connecting, and he was very nice, and he's thinking about starting a business a lot like the one that I have. And so I said, you know what? If you have questions, let me know. And I said, you know, I'm doing this webinar coming up. It's one that I was doing by myself. And I said, you know, do you have people that you might want to invite to it? Here's a code. You can invite some people for free. Within an hour, this guy had 8 people sign up for a webinar, and I had never met him. I left one comment on his article. And really the idea here in how you approach this, and I think that with the things like the Fairygodboss groups, this has been set up in a way to really help you. And there are a lot of people out there who are facilitating this process. But the way you want to approach it is this. And the reason it's scary and intimidating is because we don't really know the rules for this yet. So let's imagine that you go to a networking event and you meet someone new. And you usually go up to them, you think about how you'd approach a person. You'd often say, you know, what do you do? Or what drew you to this event? Did you enjoy the speaker? Or something like that, right? And you get to know them and you make a genuine connection with them. But for some reason, when we get online, we lose our heads. We think, oh my gosh, you work at Google. I would like to work at Google. Can you introduce me? We go straight to the ask without showing up, making a genuine connection. And I think it's because we often don't know how to do that. So here's how I want you to think about it. What you're going to do is if you join a Fairygodboss group or you are connecting with people on LinkedIn, think about what you can give first. And don't just give with the expectation that, oh, this is going to be a transactional situation. Show up and give because you genuinely want to connect with people and they can tell when that's the case. So I always say, just go out, give. And that's, you know, with this guy, I was really interested in his article and I was kind of looking through this group to see which people had showed up to put themselves out there and hadn't got any responses. And so when you show up and say, you know what, I read your article, I put a comment, I'd be willing to share my experiences with you over email. And I genuinely want to help those people for the same people that have helped me. And it's all about paying it forward. But when you do that, when you have a need, you're going to be able to call in people as well. So make genuine connections with people and you are probably, when you give, you're doing it with the hope that you can ask. But as long as you're there to help others, people are going to get that. And then we have a chance to lift each other up. So think about it the way that you would approach someone in person. When you approach someone online, notice something about their profile. Send them an article you think would be interesting to them. See if there's something that they're promoting. I met someone one time and I've been able to keep in touch with her. And I actually talked to her and asked her advice about an article that I was writing for a magazine. And I've been able to do that because she volunteers for these organizations. And I think what the organization is doing fantastic. So I'm always trying to attend the events and promote the events for her. And it's just a way for us all to naturally help each other and we get more done that way. So approach connecting with people online to make a genuine connection and be willing to give more than you're going to ask for. All right, so let's go to the Q&A. We'll find out if Sam is ready. And after the Q&A, I do have a couple other things I want to talk about with you guys. Does that work, Sam, that we can do Q&A and then kind of do a wrap up at the end?
Yeah. For
Awesome.
sure. So we had a lot of questions come through while you were talking.
Right.
So let's just get into them. The first one that came up a few times, actually, I'm not sure if you remember it, the name of the book you mentioned in the very beginning of your presentation.
Yes. Was it Give and Take by Adam Grant?
I think that's what they're referring to.
That's that is
Continue,
the
sorry.
book that is talks a lot about being willing to give more than you take and about not making your whole life be transactional. And I think that that's been really powerful for me because I watched some of my friends who were always willing to help me, and I wondered how they had enough time to do it. And it's because when you show up for other people, and there is a little bit in that book, and I'm only on chapter 3, and I had to go to chapter 7 because I was like, how do you do this without falling into these traps of people who just ask for more and more and more? And they talk a little bit about kind of vetting people who are going to try to take advantage of it, but otherwise when people show up for you knowing that you can give and that it will not hold you back. So Give and Take by Adam Grant, and he has a lot of research in his book, so I highly recommend it. I will say this, I'm a bit disappointed at this point in how male the book is. He talks about very few women, and that distracts me, but so far the content is good.
Okay, cool. I think somebody was also asking about the confidence gap. I think Jenny
Oh, thank
mentioned
you.
that.
So there is an
Absolutely.
article
Got it.
called The Confidence Gap by The Atlantic, and it is still something you can find very easily on Google. So all you have to do is write in The Confidence Gap, The Atlantic, and it'll pop right up for you. Tons of amazing research in that. The Dunning-Kruger effect is in there, the one I talked
Got
about.
it. All right,
Yeah.
awesome. So just a reminder to everybody, I'm looking at questions in the chat, but if you can leave them in the Q&A, that's where we're going to turn our attention to first. So the first question we have is, how do you address the issue of being overqualified?
Oh,
In
this is a good
quotes.
one. Yes. Okay. So I think to some degree being overqualified is about perception. So you always want to think back to they have reservations or potential objections. What are they? And fully understanding why they're worried about that. So, in general, when you think about overqualified, they are worried that you're not going to stay very long, which means they're going to train you, they're going to ramp you up, spend a lot of time and money on you, and then they're afraid that you're going to leave. So, that's one of them. And then the other one, and I find that this often goes hand in hand with age bias, is they're worried that you're not going to stay in your lane, stay in your scope. So that you're not going to be happy. Maybe you will stay, but you'll drive everyone crazy trying to work on other projects or not getting the work that they need done, right? So often where you can address that is in an interview, and being able to talk about why you want that job and address it and take that elephant in the room and say, this is why I want this job. This is why this is meaningful to me. If you're able to convey what drives you, that is often what's going to help them understand that you want to be there. Because we like to think that whether I'm qualified or not is the reason that I get hired, when the truth of the matter is, and some people in other countries might be able to speak to this, because I know, having lived abroad, networking is so much more important in the US than is in other countries. Other places will say it's really more about where I went to school, the qualifications, the degrees, the certifications I have. And if you look at our process, it's very clear that we're doing face-to-face interviews because we care about those soft skills and because we care about whether someone's a cultural fit, what really often just means bias. So a lot of it is, are you going to be happy here? Are we going to like working with you? And are you going to like working with us? Those are 2 out of the 3 reasons. The other one being, are you qualified? And so there's a huge place for you to make that argument and to present yourself as a person who truly wants to be there with a compelling reason why this fits into your career path.
I think that's helpful. I think we had a few people kind of ask similar questions to that one. So I hope that kind of clears things up for people. We have another question here asking, if you're pivoting careers, how do you set up your LinkedIn profile to show your experience and abilities without the search engine or ATS pushing you into your old area of expertise? That's a good question.
Yes, this is the exact problem that I had, right? So essentially, I'll say the quick answer to this is it's going to try to push you into your old level expertise. I'm really interested to see in the next 10 years where AI takes us with this and how it learns to get around that. But all of these things are created by humans. And humans have that bias. And I state the things that I learned from Venus and her work because what that gets to is the fact that hiring managers and the hiring process has not caught up in the sense of where we actually are. And that is why they say, I want someone with all of these things. That person, most part people who get hired are actually only going to meet about 80% of the qualifications. And so when you get in an interview, you can assume that you meet 80% of qualifications, and everyone else you're up against does as well. So there's a long way to do this, which is you can pull up the job descriptions and you can target, say, these are the 3 job descriptions I'm looking for. And you can go through, and it's very tedious. This is what I do for my clients, is we go through and we pull out everything that they've done that aligns to the job descriptions they're targeting. And then we work and make those into new bullets and we put those on the LinkedIn profile. But I find that people have a very hard time doing that on their own. So what I would recommend is attacking the networking side of things. Because hiring managers, if you talk to them, they'll tell you they know that this problem exists, this discrepancy on how job descriptions are written. So that is why, and one of LinkedIn's studies said something like 80% of jobs are filled by the network of the hiring manager or their immediate team. So you want to network into the job, and that's where leveraging your current connections not only is going to help you, as I said, in terms of people who care about you, but a lot of those people are also going to understand your skill set. So I always like to say, get out there, ask for everybody's advice, be very careful about what advice you take. That's the beautiful thing. People love to give it to you, but you can discard most of it. And the people who are saying, I could see you doing program management, I could see you doing this, or I think this would be your door in, listen to them and kind of adjust your path as you go, and just keep talking to people, keep sitting down and meeting with people and having phone calls. And you should be able to network your way into that job if you have clear messaging and you're able to clearly articulate what strengths you bring to the table.
Great. A question that a lot of people have been asking is, how do you deal with ageism and age bias and get beyond that bias to get an actual interview?
Yeah, I really like this question because this is one of the main reasons a lot of my one-on-one clients come to me. And there's a couple specific clients that a lot of this is anecdotal, but we have evidence of what's worked. So leveraging your current network is a huge part of it. And this kind of goes back to a lot of the questions you guys have been asking in terms of, we often think that the way that we overcome an objection. So let's say we're sitting in front of someone in an interview, and whether they tell us this or not, we get the impression that we didn't get the job because of our age, something like that. And we think, okay, what I need to do is I need to refine my story. I need to convince them more and portray this. And often all that means is you need to look for a different person. You need to look for the people that aren't biased against age. And that's really tricky because it's going to be a spectrum, right? So you can show up to a person everyone's a little bit biased. So the things you say and do can trigger that, right? I have heard people talk about the fact that, I'm really frustrated by the fact that my computer changes every day and IT is always messing it up. Like if you say that kind of thing in an interview, you're going to trigger certain effects regardless of your age, right? In regards to how not biased that they are. One of the things that they're thinking is, I'm thinking that you're not up on tech, right? So you can do things like make sure that in your skills section of your LinkedIn and your resume that you list out all the technologies that you are familiar with. There's things that you can do, but a lot of it is about finding the right people. So the 2 things that I found the most is leveraging your current network. And I think that going by women who are your age and have dealt with some of the same things, that's using bias in your favor. Because if a woman that you know, or a man or anyone, has experienced the same difficulty you've had, they often are very biased in thinking, I'm good at my job and I had a difficult time, so I want to help you. So you want to look for those type of people specifically. And just keep talking to people and looking and seeing how they react until you find sort of that group that's going to help you, right? And then get those meetings and sit down, have them introduce you to new people and keep going that way. There's another thing that I found specifically if you're in an industry like tech. And I address this because I kind of imagine on a webinar, we probably have a high percentage of people there, but also you might experience more age bias in tech just because of the nature of the way that people think and who the hiring managers are. And 2 of my clients that are in their 50s, and one hadn't had a paid gig in over 20 years, were able to get into tech based on working on contracting agencies. And even though I think this is perceived risk versus actual risk, if you're able to find a contracting role, and usually there's agencies that help you find those, they're often going to sign you on to 3 months or 6 months. So when I think about one client, and I'm going to call her Kate, she got onto a 6-month role with Amazon Web Services as the client. And her past wasn't, she was program management in Microsoft and all these great things. And she's the one who hadn't worked for over 20 years. But now that she's worked at AWS, no one is going to have that bias that she's not up to date on the tech and can't hack it in the tech industry. She just had to get her foot on the door. So I recommend looking at contracting agencies. And the reason most people find them difficult and don't want to pursue them is because often they don't post their roles. What they usually do, and I'm talking about a company that will, if you want an example on my LinkedIn profile, I worked for a company called Launch Consulting, and it was amazing. I loved doing it. It was great. And Launch Consulting employed me as a full-time employee, but I was serving Microsoft as the client. So what happens is often those companies will bring you in and they'll add you to their pipeline and they'll say, we want to work with you. And now that we know your skill set, if a contract comes to us, we're going to put you on it. So what happens is if you look at those types of websites, often you won't see a role that applies to you. You're like, I'm looking for a learning and development program manager in tech. But they'll usually have a place where you can submit your resume and you want to do that and you want to talk to people, and they'll often have great referral programs as well who work there and get referred in because they will get you in their pipeline. And in my case, I think I started talking to them in December and didn't start with them until May, until they were able to find a contract for me. So I would say think about contracting agencies as well as the networking. And there is a website, and I can provide this for you guys in my follow-up, and I think Sam's going to send a follow-up email, is oncontracting.com, on-contracting, and they list out all the contracting agencies all over the US. I don't know if it's international, and you can filter, and it's a ton of information. So those are the two things I'd recommend: contracting and leveraging your network, finding people who might have gone through the same challenges as you.
So we've had a question come through in a variety of ways from many, many people, though. It all kind of relates to reaching out to recruiters. So this person asked, I'm making a pivot in my career. I've been using LinkedIn as well as leveraging my network. Finding people don't respond in a timely manner or say they think they're going to help, but then I don't hear back from them. How can I follow up? How much time should I allow without being annoying? Kind of along the same lines, is LinkedIn really the best way to contact recruiters? A lot of them don't respond. And finally, kind of how do I stay on top of mind and make a good impression between interviews and maybe even between, following up? Basically, what are the do's and the don'ts of contacting recruiters is what we're getting at.
This is a really good question. And I think the answer is going to surprise a lot of people. The quick answer is recruiters aren't the ones that you want to contact on LinkedIn. They're not the ones you want to do cold reach outs to. The people you're looking for are people that are going to be your hiring manager, or they're going to be your colleagues on your team. And the reason for that is, if you think about a recruiter, a lot of them, and I make a lot of generalizations. Part of this comes from my experience as a hiring manager, the recruiter I worked with, but a lot of it's not about individuals. It's about the kind of the environment right now. A lot of them are trying to search for so many people under so many headcounts. They're under a lot of pressure. And I got to see, for example, I sat with my recruiter when I first became a hiring manager, and he had to look through 100 resumes one day for this one role. And I think he was looking for like 9 roles. And we had to, most of the things that he got, he had to throw out based on the fact they didn't meet even our, like 30% of our qualifications. So when you think about that, and yes, there might be a way around this. I think if I could redesign the process, it would look different. But they are so under pressure looking for so many roles. They're thinking about things in a quick way. Like if you've seen it, recruiters spend 7 seconds looking at your resume. That is a testament to how much pressure they're under and how they're doing things in the quickest way that they can, which means often they're not on their LinkedIn. And so many people are reaching out to them on LinkedIn. They probably aren't responding in a timely manner because they're probably getting so many messages that they probably stopped trying. So A lot of companies, especially if you think of tech companies, will do a referral program. One company I work for, if someone I referred got hired, I would get $3,000. And that wasn't even a developer. From a developer, it ran $6,000 to $10,000.
Wow.
So if someone reached out for me, I would look at their profile if I had access to it, or their resume or something like that. And if I thought that, the recruiter might be interested in talking to them, I would talk to them, and usually I want to have a short conversation to make sure that they, would represent me well. But it wasn't about the fact that I'm like, I really want this money. It was, I took that to mean that the company wanted us all recruiting, and the company grew from 180 people to 1,000 in a couple years. So we all had to be out there, and I saw it as part of my job. So the type of people that you're looking for are the people that be your colleagues and the hiring managers. And a lot of times the hiring managers are the ones who are going to be responsive because they don't have those same constraints as the recruiter. And this is actually one of the best times of year to be reaching out to these types of people, because if they do have a lull in their work, this is often the time where people are going to say, oh, our clients aren't as active right now. I can take some time to look at the resumes, and sometimes the hiring managers will go in. So often you're looking for that sort of person. Now, the way that there are recruiters that are extremely responsive on LinkedIn, and here's how you can find them. And this is an overall generalization of rule of thumb, but it's worked for me. And often when I interact with recruiters, I simply just say, hey, because I have so many job seekers that follow me, I go ahead and I usually repost the roles they post without asking, because I don't need to bug them just to help them. But then if they respond or if they notice, I'll often say, if you're having a hard time with finding something, just let me know. It's mutually beneficial for me to be helping you look for that, right? What I found about the recruiters that are most responsive to my clients is some people, it's tricky because they'll say in their headline, like, hiring for this company. And then when you respond to them, they'll be like, oh, apply online. So they're seeing that as like an ad, not as like an invitation. Mm-hmm. So the ones I found typically that are most responsive, if you do come into contact with a recruiter, is they will usually post roles, and they will post specific roles as a post, or sometimes even as an article, and they'll say, here's how to contact me. So they'll usually want you to email them. They usually don't want you to reach out to them on LinkedIn, and that is because they just get so many things. So you want to look for people who post specific roles, not just a blanket, we're hiring, I'm hiring. Did they post specific roles on LinkedIn? That kind of means they have a sourcing mentality, meaning they're out there proactively looking for people who might be qualified. The other thing about just reaching out to people is knowing people are clicking on your profile, and then you just might not be what they're looking for. And the key to that is you may have to reach out to 50 people in order to get responses from 5. And it's up to you to look at your time blocking and say, how long did it take me to do that? What was the response rate of this versus some of those other deeper networking strategies? I often have my clients, we think about it as a three-pronged method that is essentially a third, and it's not quite that simple, but a third of the time leveraging your current network, a third of the time making friends online, and a third of the time applying blindly on LinkedIn, or applying blindly to Indeed, directly on the websites, things like that, because you can get so many applications in a short amount of time. So all 3 of those things can really help. And another thing that I found is, if you can reach out to someone knowing they might have a referral bonus, or they might be kind of having that mentality before you apply, but if they don't get back to you within 24, 48 hours, go ahead and apply online. One of the ways you can reach out to people is say something like, I've already applied, but I would really like to learn more about your company. Would you be willing to have a 15-minute phone call with me, or answer some questions by email? Because that is kind of this way that you're not putting anything on them. It takes off the pressure. You've already done the work that you need to do. And then you're kind of saying, would you like to talk to me? And not everyone's going to say yes. And it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, because your real goal is to get eyes on your profile. So that's something to keep in mind. As far as so you guys asked, like, how do I follow up? Should I follow up? I would assume the first time you send a message, think about how many times, especially on a place like LinkedIn, and I don't know how direct messaging in Fairygodboss works, but people message me and I click on it when I'm walking or when I first wake up in the morning, and then I don't see that as unread, versus when people send me an email, I mark it as unread until I deal with it. So they can easily forget about it and get lost, especially if they're experiencing a lot of influx. So I would always assume that the first one, if you get no response, is just a fluke and it just got lost. I would always send a second message, and I would think in terms of give them 48 to 72 hours to respond and send one more. And that is an okay thing to follow up with them. And you'll usually notice because about, I want to say half the time, but I guess it's less if these are people that you have no connection to. They'll send you a response like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I meant to respond and it got lost. And so you'll often get that sort of response as well. But this is one of the downfalls of connecting with people like this is you're going to have, if anyone's done sales, they understand when I leverage my current network, the success rate of getting a meeting is going to be like 50%. But when I'm trying to connect with people I've never met before, your success rate is probably going to be around 20%. So if you aren't getting 1 in 5 people responding to you, I would think about your messaging and it might mean you need to clarify that. But if you are, know that that's just kind of the game, and it makes sense if you're able to do so in a way that makes sense for time for you. So just if you have that message, you can reach out. And I think the reason a lot of people probably aren't getting reached out to is if you hit me up and you're looking for a need right away and I have no affiliation to you, often people get so many requests like that. But again, can you show up and get to know that person a little bit? Is there something you guys have in common? And especially, can you give to them? And that's the main reason you're doing that, is to show that you're not just a taker, right? Because if you show up and you ask for something, they don't know you from Adam. But for example, for me, when I'm reposting for recruiters, they know that all I'm going to do is keep reposting for them. So it makes sense for them to do it because it's more about how we can work together. So that's kind of how I'd approach that. Is that a lot to answer I can answer if you interview how to follow up? Is that a question that came up as well, Sam?
Kind of. I was actually going to ask about informational interviews because that question has been coming through a bunch as well, and you just mentioned it. Just a note to everybody listening. I know we're probably not going to have time to get to all of our questions, but do not worry. Lynn has started a Fairygodboss group, and you're more than welcome to post all your questions there. She'll be answering them there. So if we don't get to them right now, you can ask for them later. But we had two or three questions now about informational interviews and thinking really quick on your feet, tips for that, because some people are more comfortable with in-person interviews. So they're trying to figure out how to show their personality and how to show their experience through the phone.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think I'd like to kind of answer it in a different way, in more of a holistic way, which is we often think that we have to come up with these things, or we feel this pressure on the spot, because we have this perception that other people who do really well in informational interviews or phone interviews, that they're just naturally good at. And it really has to do with the thinking that they've done and the preparation that they've done. And it might seem like people haven't prepared, but often that'll happen naturally because of them having to do that kind of communication for their job or whatever. So the way that whenever you're talking to people, and we kind of went into this earlier in terms of being concise and decisive, where I learned this is that I did train the trainer. So I would train all these people at a tech company, all of the customer success, all the trainers, in how to deliver training on the tech product, right? And what I found is that most customer success people would say, well, I do all of my explaining off the cuff, but that's not really what they were doing. They had a tool belt full of different phrases they use that would work. So when they talk about this feature, they would use this. They found that these verbs work the best, and this is the explanation that works best. They talk about this feature, but depending on what question was asked, they would pull out that kind of messaging that they had. And that's how you want to approach informational interviews, phone interviews. The number one thing to think about is what drives you, because I do mock interviews with people all the time, both over Google Hangouts, in person, and sometimes they will talk for 15 minutes before they light up. I had one client and she had been, out of work in I don't want to say, being a mom is really hard, right? But she had not been in a corporate environment for a while, and she was one of the most intimidating resumes I've ever seen. So impressive. But she's like, you don't understand. I had cheers in my hair this morning. And the thing was that people get really, she talked for a while, and her face was just like so dead. Like, in trying to be professional, None of her personality came through. And then she mentioned, I have 2 sons, and her face lit up. And I said, that's what we want to see when you talk about your work, because that's how you show people that you're actually passionate about this work, right? And I know passionate has become overused. So when we go back to, there's only 3 reasons that you get hired for something, right? Every question and interview, every networking comes back to, are you qualified? But also, are you going to be happy here? And are we going to like working with you? And the easiest one to tackle is, are you going to be happy here? People want to understand what drives you. Why do you do what you do? How can you spend 40 plus hours a week here? And so for your personality to come across, and I have worked with people who come across very calm, who have monotone voices, when they start talking about something that they're interested in, that they're curious about, that they find challenging and interesting, you can feel it, you can hear it in their voice, you can see it in their face. So for you, it's thinking about, why do I do this? What do I care about? And making sure that that is first and foremost in your interview. And sometimes they even have people, it makes sense if she feels comfortable to talk about her kids, because if she wants to be at a place that's going to be friendly to that, she has this schedule and she's very, very, very qualified, right? Some people might not feel comfortable. It's kind of good for people to see that she lights up talking about her kids. And that's a common connection with a lot of other people that she can have as well. So whatever that thing is that drives you, that's what they want to see, because literally, I know many cases of this, and I had a discussion with my own manager about this. We've interviewed people where we just felt like something was wrong, and as analyzing it, they never talked about what they cared about. They never talked about what drove them. They never talked about liking anything. It was all, well, I'm qualified for this. Here's what I've done. But I'm afraid that you're going to quit in 90 days if that's the case. So think about what drives you, and that is the best way. And putting that work in ahead of time to think about that is going to help you be able to talk off the cuff, supposedly, knowing that those questions are coming your way.
That's really great advice, and I hate to do this, but we are officially out of time for today. There are some great questions about adding soft skills to your resume and salary. So please, I put the link to Lynn's Fairygodboss group in the chat. I'm also going to be sending it in the email with the recording that you'll all get. Please join the group, ask your questions there. Lynn will be getting to them. Thank you again, Lynn, for being here. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. I'm going to answer every question that goes into the group, so you can put them all there. And out of the people that join, I'm going to pick 5 people to win 20-minute one-on-one coaching sessions with me. So I hope to see you guys over there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Lynn. And thank you everybody for joining us. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and week. Bye.